is, well, before we get into the topic, let me start with, we're approaching a new quarter, right? I know it's only March 6th, but the end of the month will be here before you know it. And we are going to be moving into a new quarter. Now, maybe you actually are feeling none of these things I'm about to say, and you're like, it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't change my goals at the end of the quarter. I don't do quarterly goals. You could be feeling a million different ways. Maybe you want to blow up your annual goals. You're like, I don't like these. These are not working. I'm not motivated. I need new goals. Maybe you're way ahead. Maybe you're crushing your goals, and these goals you set for the year and for the quarter, you're way ahead of them. Maybe you just need some slight tweaks. Maybe things are going pretty well and you just need to tweak a couple of things here and there. And maybe it's a combination of all of these things, depending on the goal, right? Maybe one goal you want to blow up and change and get rid of. Maybe one goal you're way ahead, and maybe one goal you just need some slight tweaks. There is no right or wrong way to feel, but I want you to know, like, it's okay to feel these things. Like, you're going to be feeling these things as we are approaching a somewhat of a milestone in the year. So over the next few weeks in the month of March on the lives, we're going to be talking about quarterly refreshes and different aspects of it over the next couple of weeks. Today, that topic is changing action steps. So not necessarily changing goals, but changing the action steps you're taking to achieve those goals. Because my guess is, if you're anything like me, most of us are probably going to be keeping at least one of the same goals that you had in Q1. Whether it's just the annual goal that you're keeping and you're picking a different focus for Q2, or you're literally like, I am almost directly carrying over, at least right now in my brainstorming phase, I have brainstormed that I'm going to carry over directly a Q1 goal into Q2. So what does that mean for Q2? Do we keep all the action steps the same? Do we change them? Like, what does that look like? So what I'm going to give you today are 3 questions, 3 categories, Laken, because 2 of them have multiple questions. 3 things to think about as you start to think about the refresh. This is not, you need final answers to this today or you're going to fail the rest of the year. No. That is not what I'm saying. These are just things for you to start to think about as we move in to the second quarter and refreshing, changing our action steps for Q2. So question number 1, how has your life changed? I'm just going to pause and let that sink in for a second. Also, I'm not asking you to answer these right now with us in the comments or on a piece of paper. Come back and reference this when you need to. Think about these questions as you're brushing your teeth and commuting to work, etc. But how has your life changed since you set goals last time? So since the middle of December. Some of it might be really obvious if you've had a big life change. You've moved, you've changed jobs, you got into a relationship, you got out of a relationship. There's some very obvious things that could have happened. Some of it could be a direct impact, right? Like, my little girl grew 3 months. That is actually a big change, right? I didn't have her, but she went from a 3-month-old, 3.5-month-old to now a 6.5-month-old. There's a lot that has changed about her life and her needs. Some for the more helpful for me, right? Like sleeping patterns, and some of them a little less helpful. I have to feed her real food, and that is a lot of extra cleaning and things and thoughts and planning that goes into that. So that's how my life has changed. I have gotten into more of a routine with my mom and having help with my daughter. But at the same time, it's still all up in the air. And then my mom's going to go out of town for 2.5 weeks next month. And what am I doing that week? How am I balancing that, right? Thinking about what has changed in your life. And it could be as small as I don't even why don't I have an example in my head of a small change that could have happened? I'm not saying it had to be something giant. It could be something small that could still have an impact on changing your action steps, which is what we're getting at in the topic for today, is how has my life changed? And how might that, I should have put this on here, how might that impact my action steps? How might that change impact the action steps that I'm going to take related to my goals? Question 2, ask yourself, what worked in Q1? And before you come at me and say, nothing worked, Q1 was terrible, I did nothing, one thing, I want you to try very, very hard, even if it's hard, to come up with one thing that did work. And even if it's not related to your goals, that's okay. What's one thing that worked for you in Q1? Was it um I like my I didn't put any examples in my notes because usually I'm pretty good at coming up with them on the fly, like on like examples off the top of my head. And right now they are just like not working, with the exception of like coming up with my own examples, right? Um, what works is making a plan kind of the week of with my mom. What worked is um also trying to find things to share that are what worked for me and not necessarily related to my little girl. Um, doing my morning routine in different chunks and not all at one time. That worked for me. Getting back onto batching content at the end of the month for the whole next month. That worked for me. And then asking yourself, what action steps actually help me work towards my goals? And I feel like I reference this call all the time. But the very first live of the year, like the very first one of the year, was how to get clear on what your goals mean to you. And that is still so essential, because if you do not know what that goal looks like for you and what it means to you, you don't know if your action steps actually helped you get towards that goal. So for example, I was just texting with somebody in the community yesterday about their reading goal. They were like, I don't know what to do about my reading goal. I am a rebel tendency. And so I struggle sometimes with setting exact number goals, but I don't necessarily want to say read these exact books because then my rebel tendency doesn't like that. And I said, before we even consider on like what you're reading or what your goal is, I want you to tell me why. Why are you reading? What does a reading goal mean to you? What does it look like to you? What are you trying to get out of this reading goal before we even start to talk about what the goal should look like? And so you might have to rewind and go back. Now, don't get me wrong, that's going to be part of the refresh. Spoiler alert. Getting clear on what our goals mean to us and kind of revisiting that. But you have to know what you wanted to know if the action step helped you get there, right? Did you accomplish what you set out to accomplish? Then those action steps are working, right? It worked for you. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to keep doing them, right? It doesn't mean that you have to do those same action steps. You could still change them. But by knowing what did work can really help you pick to either keep those same action steps or pick different but similar ones in the next quarter. And it likely is not going to surprise you that the last piece is what didn't work. What didn't work about your goals or your action steps in Q1? Which action steps did you not do? Which action steps were really hard? Which action steps felt like they were just a chore and not actually getting you anywhere? And then dig a little deeper and ask yourself, what didn't work about it? Was it that it was too big? Was it that it was at the wrong time of day? Was it that you needed somebody else to do something first before you could do it? Was it that you were trying to do something that was like that didn't actually align with your goal? Was it that the action step didn't actually matter and you just put it down because that's what everybody does for that goal, right? What didn't work about that? Once again, even if you're changing your goal and there's an answer like this action step didn't work, but I'm not doing that goal anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's still information. It's still knowledge. It's still it tells you something about how you function and operate to know whether it worked or didn't work. And I want to remind you that just because something didn't work doesn't mean that you failed. You're not a failure. You didn't fail. It just didn't work for you. And that is information that you can then carry into the next month and the next quarter. I would love to sit here and tell you that your year is going to look perfect and that you're going to accomplish all the goals that you set out to, and all the action steps are going to be perfectly aligned with your goals, and you're just going to make progress on them all year, and you're going to cross finish line in December and it's going to look great. No, that's not what it's going to look like. That just isn't how it works. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. And sometimes you find these big breakthroughs, like figuring out, oh my gosh, this really does work for me and I am crushing it. And then sometimes you find you're like, that does not work for me at all. And I know that now, and now I can take that information and use it for different purposes and different goals. So, all of those things, it's not a test, not a quiz. I'm not asking you to like write essays about these questions. It's just to get you thinking. It's just to get you thinking and to get your brain, your little gears turning so that we can do a whole refresh, a whole goal refresh. And even if you are one of these people from way back here that's like, I just need to tweak a couple things. Like, I don't actually want to change my goals. That's fine. We're still going to check in with our annual goals. We're going to acknowledge the progress that we've made. We're going to acknowledge what has worked and what has not worked, and then move into our quarterly goals. And once again, even if you do not set quarterly goals, my guess is you probably still need to break down your annual goals. You probably need another session of breaking down and coming up with action steps from what you did in December. And then, as always, we've got to set up the new month. So the third part of it, which isn't even in this comment, is we've got to get April all set up. But the meat and potatoes of it is getting our annual goals checked in with and our quarterly goals all set up and broken down. And we're doing that on a weekend.